Welcome to Bart and Tart Talk About Art.
Bling, 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 bling. So, Mr. Eric B, why
Hello.
did you choose this painting called The Heart of Andes by Frederic Edwin Church, painted in the 19th century? Am I right?
That is correct. Yeah,
Yes.
it was painted in, or it was exhibited in 1859
Mhm.
by the American artist Frederick Edwin Church, and he painted it after going on expeditions to Latin America that were, funny detail, they were financed by a businessman called Cyrus Westfield, who was looking for a church to create some awesome looking paintings that would make people want to go to Latin America, or specifically investors, to partake in Mr. Field's financial adventures. So it's kind of propaganda in a way. Um, it was based on a number of sketches of things that Church actually saw by the Andes. But of course, it's kind of a composite. But we can talk about that some more later. Another thing I found interesting about it was that when he exhibited it in. It was sort of this one painting exhibition in New York. I can't remember the exact address of it, but they had this one painting there, and they had sort of dramatic lighting. They had sort of drapes like on the sides of it, as if you were sort of, it was a window and you were looking into another world. And I think 12 or 13,000 people paid to come see this particular painting. Um, and Mark Twain sang its praises. It was a very renowned painting at the time. The reason I sort of stumbled across it was that I was setting up my new office, and the acoustics were terrible, and so I decided to get one of these sort of foam, heavy, like thick foam painting or sort of wall elements that can sort of dampen the sound a little bit. And I went looking for something to put on it, and one of the places I looked was the Met in New York. They have this part of their website where they have public domain artwork, and this was there. And I think it appealed to me just on a level of, we're in the middle of a corona lockdown. Nobody gets to go anywhere exciting. So to have this to sort of look at as if I was looking out a window at a spectacular view, that was sort of appealing to me on a base level. But I do think there are, as much as it is, like, I think it's the kind of thing I feel like I have to defend a little bit because it kind of is very cheesy. But at the same time, I think there are some interesting aspects to this painting. So, I mean, the back history I think is kind of funny. It points to a time in art history where, paintings were escapism in a way that they are not now, and they haven't been in a long time. So this is before like the motion pictures. This, like, paintings like these were kind of like the Hollywood movies of their time, right? And people would go in there and they would look and they would be sucked into the illusion. This painting was 3 meters wide and 1.7 meters tall. Um, so if you got close enough to it, it would kind of, fill out the almost the entire field of vision. And people would get lost in these sort of very intricate details. So it is, I guess we should talk a little bit about what it actually is, since, um, or people can see it, of course. But anyway, it is this sort of landscape. You can sort of see in the foreground there is a little path to a cross and some people there, and further in the background there's a church and a little city there, and then there's just the majestic Andes mountains. There's also something that seems like halfway up the mountain that there's maybe a fire there. There's some smoke. There's all these sort of tiny details that you can catch in them. And Church was very inspired by the German scientist Humboldt, who had this notion that art should communicate the majesty of nature. And part of the idea was to do it in a very exact way. So the way Church has painted the trees and the flowers and stuff like this, part of that was also this sort of expedition to try and capture details of what it's like down there, because of course this is before the internet, this is before photographs. This is before any conceivable way that people could really get an image of what does it look like down there if they were in, say, New York. But I like this idea of art taking you somewhere else. And I think mainly because it has largely disappeared now, or it's sort of been relegated to, concept art for video games and movies. It's sort of not in fine art anymore. And I think in a way it's kind of sad, because I think it is one of those qualities that art that have just been, just been relegated to a very sort of low status among fine arts people. And I think there is a lot of craft in this. I think it is, for me, there is a joy in just looking at this and just getting absorbed by the tiny details. And I mean, I think it helps a lot that I'm looking at my version here. It's like 1 meters and 20 centimeters wide. Like looking at that versus looking at it on a screen, that helps as well. I think there is something very charming and old-fashioned about that. And that's what I liked about this painting. But what do you think about it, Simao? Because I imagine, and I don't know, but I would imagine that you absolutely hate this painting.
You are absolutely right.
I am correct. Excellent.
But before I tell you what I think about this painting, let me see if I understood. So you put this painting on a wall of your house. It covers the entire wall.
No. It's only 1 meters, 20 centimeters wide. So no, I can't afford something that covers my entire wall. But it is a fairly big picture, and it's made out of this sort of foam material that means that it absorbs a lot of sound. So it's a way to dampen the sound in the room, so it doesn't sound like a bathroom or a cave or something.
I see. So it's like it's kind of a print, but a print on a material that absorbs sound, and it's a very big print.
Exactly. Correct.
Okay. All right. And you bought mostly because you needed something to absorb the sound.
Yeah, but I could have put anything on there, so.
That's true. Yeah. And yet you chose to put this hideous painting.
So why is it hideous, Simao? Tell me.
Okay, I think you hit the spot when you said that's very kitschy. But for me, more than being kitschy, I think it's more boring than kitschy, to be honest. I think it's not, because I think kitsch can be fun, Kitsch can be playful and all of that. I think this painting is too plain to be.
But isn't when you say something is kitsch, doesn't that mean that it's cliche? That it's playing around with, that it's just sort of replicating, like the crying Roma baby or whatever it is, that it's just sort of this mindless replication of things we've seen 1,000 times, because this is something he went down here, he researched it. This is a serious, earnest effort to reproduce something that he saw. Does that not automatically not make it kitsch?
Not for me, because I think kitsch for me has the over-the-top feeling, right? For example, that example that you gave of the Roma baby crying or something along those lines. It has that over-the-top pathos, right? That over-the-top emotion or something being conveyed along those lines. This doesn't. I was thinking in the beginning that this is like romantic painting, but I think it has more to do with naturalism.
Yes.
Actually, if I'm not wrong. So it supposedly portrays something that was there, even though, as you said, it's very idealized. I also like to know what do you think that it's more idealized there, even though I can see that, I can feel that as well, that it's an idealized version of the Andes. But it's not enough for me. It's not idealized enough to be kitschy. It's not over the top idealized. And one thing that for me strikes me the most, and I find that actually interesting, is that this version of the Andes, this version of South America, has nothing to do with my idea of what would be, the Andes. Actually.
Yeah.
Because you said that this painting is a piece of propaganda from back in the day. But it's very different from the kind of propaganda that we get now,
right?
Of what South America is. For example, when you said that, it reminded me a lot of what Walt Disney did, because Walt Disney, he was commissioned to do propaganda about South America as well, about the allies of the states. That's why the Los Tres Caballeros, the three gentlemen, were created. And there is one short of those that I've watched multiple times, which is the one about Brazil. And that one for me conveys pretty much what Brazil is, the best of Brazil. And for me, this painting doesn't seem, compelling, doesn't make me want to go to the Andes, doesn't seem, it seems pretty, kind of dead. At the same time, sure, I would like to walk in the mountains and all of that, but for me, it seems very European in a way, Maybe the Andes look exactly like that. And the ideas that I have of the Andes are too much, too idealized or not accurate at all. But that seems to me a very European landscape.
Well, the reason why I said it was a composite is I think Church came from a tradition of being very serious about trying to portray nature the way it looks in terms of the details. So I think in terms of what trees are there, what plants are there, my feeling is that that's pretty accurate. But at the same time, he's painting in a tradition of landscape painting where there are all these sort of rules, or at least sort of these ideals of how to compose these images. So I don't believe that there was anywhere at that time where there was this one particular view. Like, for one thing, there would have been stuff in the way, probably, right? And how is he up there? This is a combination of different elements into one panorama, and following all these sort of rules about there should be soft curves, there should be hard curves, there should be contrasts between the two. So you have sort of the placid water, and you have sort of the wildness of the foliage, and all this stuff. It follows rules, but at the same time, in terms of the details, there's also this ideal of, of it almost being like an encyclopedia of the plant life of that place. So I think I would guess it's sort of fairly accurate in terms of what kind of stuff you might find down there, and at the same time, it's idealized and composed for sort of maximum majesty. In this tradition of the picturesque landscape painting.
Also, one thing that you mentioned now, the word majestic, right? And something that makes artwork immediately kitsch is usually the fact that it's reproduced, right? Like a print, as in a kind of a print, right? Usually that has that effect. If you put a Mona Lisa in the middle of your room, that Mona Lisa gets automatically kind of a kitsch effect. So I think that maybe if I was seeing this painting on a museum, maybe I would be way more impressed by it than I am right now, because looking at it in a monitor of a screen, which is what I'm looking at right now, I think that I would not spend maybe not even a second looking at this painting if I would see it in a museum, because I remember going to the Louvre, in Paris, and you have all the best paintings, all next to each other. But a lot of them are. This is naturalism, which you don't find so much there, as far as I remember. But you have all those great paintings like this, like this one, in the sense that they are very technically correct, very detailed, and all of that. And at some point, I didn't even look at them. I would just go to the room where there were things to the rooms where there were things a bit more, exciting, more different from each other. Because what I think that this painting lacks is kind of, it doesn't have I don't feel that there's a lot of creativity
Mm-hmm.
involved. There is a lot of technicality. It's a very technically precise painting. A great painter, a person that draws unbelievably well. But personally, I don't. What I like in an image is the creativity, that spark of expression and creativity, and I don't see that much.
It's a little bit like.
But I do.
Sorry.
But I do see what you see in the sense of, that you compare it with concept art, the thing of escapism that brings you to a different reality, even a different time, because, that shows the Andes back in the 19th century. Maybe if we would go there right now to that place that it's kind of imaginary, because, as you said, it's a mix of different things, but probably it's inspired on a very specific place. And probably if we'd go there now, it's completely different. So we're in a way we're looking to a window of time. We're looking to a thing that doesn't exist anymore. So that's interesting, but that in itself, it doesn't excite me that much.
No. I think one of the things that, like, whether this excites you or not, I think there is a loss in how fine arts have become almost exclusively about communicating ideas and concepts, and very much not about suspension of disbelief anymore. And this is a wild generalization, but I think when you go to museums of modern art, there's not a lot of immersion there. There's not a lot of seduction of the senses there. There's a lot of sort of fairly dry stuff that's produced to make you think about the nature of art and the problems of the world. There's not a lot that you sort of experience in a very immediate way. And I'm not saying there should be more of this stuff necessarily, but I think it does remind me that I miss some more of that stuff. So, for instance, Aarhus Art Museum, that's close to where both of us are, in Aarhus, they have this video art in the basement by Bill Viola. I can't even remember what it's called, The Ascension, something like that. It's on these huge screens, and it's these beautiful images in super slow motion, and that's something that sort of, for me, is captivating on sort of a sensorial level, in a way a lot of modern art is not. And I wish more of it would try to be, because I feel like art has ceded territory to the movies, to video games, and a lot of other, like, another example could be Ron Muick. Their auras have the boy statue, which affects you in a very direct way, because it's this boy who's a little boy, but he's in a giant scale, and you feel that statue on sort of a base level, and on a level that everybody can relate to. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I'm saying that I feel like there is a lot more art that is not very immersive, that is not very visceral, that is very sort of cerebral and intellectual and based on ideas rather than experiences. And that's something that this painting reminds me of, if nothing else. It's that there once was a time. Another thing that I think is, it's in some ways it's a little bit like watching an old black and white movie from the 30s or something like that. I mean, you can't necessarily immediately appreciate. You kind of have to understand the context that it was made in, because if you show that to a young person, somebody who's not interested in film history, that person will probably say, this is slow, this is too much, they're overacting, and all of that stuff. But then if you sort of, avail yourself of the history of that and dive more into it, you get to appreciate the strengths of that tradition, and that you could do things in that medium that it's much harder to do in film now, like expressionist cinema in Germany and stuff like that. And I think you kind of have to do some of the same with this. You kind of have to imagine being in a world where you didn't have access. You couldn't just go on Google or just go on the internet and find photos of wherever in the world immediately. You weren't in this bombardment of colorful images constantly. And I think this would have been very magical at that time. And I can sort of imagine that, but maybe part of why I can imagine that is that when I was in the US with my family a couple of years ago, we did see, not this particular painting that I recall, but quite a few examples. It feels to me like a very American tradition, having these gigantic paintings of majestic scenery. Probably also because in their own conception, that was part of like, okay, so America is not the most advanced place in the world, but we have majestic nature. So look how majestic it is, right? And so I've had the experience of standing before a painting like these that are gigantic, and just feeling the impact of that. And I think that does have something going for it. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There is also a part of me that just thinks it's kind of funny and ironic to have something like this hanging on the wall. So I'm not gonna claim this is the apex of art. But I do think it has qualities that I sometimes miss in modern art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I agree in the sense on your critique of not so much of modern art, but of contemporary art, to be more precise. Because usually I like modern art, not so much contemporary art. But I do, as in, back in when this painting was made, there's always, boring artists and good artists. And I do think that in the museums, most of the art that is presented there it's pretty boring. But I remember, for example, you were talking about the effect of being immersed in an artwork and the kind of escapism and all of that. And you mentioned a museum in Denmark, Aarhus. But there is another museum in Denmark, Louisiana Museum, for example. I like both museums, but I'm referring to Louisiana because there was a particular exhibition, a retrospective of Yayoi Kusama, a Japanese artist, and she creates a lot of installations,
with dots,
that
right?
are quite immersive, and they're quite playful, and they kind of also bring you this feel of escapism, so to speak. And so I don't think that completely vanished from art. And also, you mentioned that sometimes for us to enjoy the artwork, we need to put ourselves in the contexts when it was made. To a certain extent, I agree, but I think that sometimes it's not that necessary. For example, you mentioned the early cinema, right? And I think a Charlie Chaplin movie is as enjoyable now as it was back in the day. I remember watching a Charlie Chaplin movie when I was 13 or 14 in a classroom in Portugal with a lot of kids, and we were laughing, we were enjoying, as I believe audiences would be laughing and enjoying when when it was showed for the first time. And my classmates, believe me, they were far from being art connoisseurs, or from being movie buffers. What's the word?
Movie buffs.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for example, and in this kind of painting tradition of being more realistic and all of that, I remember when I was 15 or so, I was super into Caravaggio, for example, and I think you can, or back then I could, because now I'm not a big fan of Caravaggio anymore. I think for me Caravaggio now has pretty much the same effect as this painting has, but back in the time, I could feel Caravaggio. I could really feel the intensity of the paintings and all of that. So I think, because you can also say the same about a lot of boring contemporary art that is in a museum that comes with a text, right? That says the text is the context. If you don't read the text or the whole book or the whole library where that inspired this piece of work, you will not enjoy it, you will not understand it, boo you, so I think that thing of the context sometimes not that interesting, because I think art should be interesting, or people should like art on an immediate level for different reasons. I think you enjoyed that painting probably the first time that you saw it, on an immediate emotional aesthetic level, the same way
Sure.
that I hated it, the same time that I saw it, Then you can say, okay, but I liked it because of this and this and that. And the
Sure.
reasons why you told me that you like it made me like it a bit more, or at least dislike it a little less.
I think in a way
But
my oh sorry.
yeah, go on, go on.
Well, I think maybe in a way my comment was a little misplaced actually, because I think what made me think of the the historical context was more than this particular painting. It was when you talked about going to the Louvre and just
Hmm.
becoming completely jaded in record time, just like eyes glazing over at the sight of baby Jesuses and etc. etc. I'm paraphrasing here, but that's been my experience exactly, and I completely agree with that. And I think there is a way in which museums like that, as much as they are like that, as much as amazing as it is to be able to go into this one place and see all this art, in a way they completely destroy the experience of the art as well, I think. I was reading this comics biography of Caravaggio, since you mentioned Caravaggio, so that could be one example. But there are these scenes where he shows off these huge paintings he's made of biblical scenes to regular people. And these are people that aren't exposed to paintings ever, basically, right? And they go in here, they go in and they see these paintings painted in this sort of very vivid style. And like I think he was a real master of painting people that looked like people and that acted like people in a way that not a lot of artists were able to do back then. There was sort of a very similitude and at the same time a drama to it, and the expressive lighting and all that stuff. And I think that just made a gigantic impact at the time that is completely diluted when those same paintings are placed next to 1,000 other paintings of a similar kind. And I think there is part of the frustration of loving art, or sort of there's this weird paradox where on one hand it's frustrating having to travel all over the world to see, like, if you just really love Van Gogh, you have to travel. So like the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam is not going to get you very far. It's not a lot of the really good pieces are there, right? You have to travel all over Europe and to the US and a lot of other places to get just to see like a decent portion of it, right? Of at least of the greatest artworks. So that's frustrating, but at the same time, the fact that all of this stuff is placed in the same place just completely dilutes the experience of it. And I know it's not practically feasible, but I wish there was a way that we could go back to having these paintings be in a place where they're not surrounded by all this other visual noise, and where they're able to just leave an impression on you on their own, rather than as part of this sort of supermarket of great art through history, right?
Yeah, I think you are absolutely right. I always have that thing. I remember specifically, yeah, with the museum, and specifically with the Caravaggios in the Louvre, that I before that I loved so much Caravaggio that I remember when I got there, I was like, well, why am I not overwhelmed by seeing a real Caravaggio? I've seen it so much in the books. I should be full of joy of seeing a Caravaggio here, but I did not. That was quite a bit disappointing. So yeah, in a way, I think you're absolutely right. And I think to compare that experience to the experience that people had when they saw this specific painting for the first time, this one that you presented us, I think it's because the way it was framed, right? You said that it was put in a very specific setting, with the
With
way it was framed,
and only
the
this one
room, the
painting
lighting.
there. Yeah.
It was given a lot of attention, so
Mm-hmm.
people could feel, the power of the painting. I think that's actually something that contemporary art completely understood. because you can put a piece of trash in the middle of the room, but because it's the only thing in the entire room, you'll pay attention to it. It will seem important.
That's
So
true.
even though it's a piece of trash, you'll think about it twice. And these paintings, even though they take way more time to make, and way more expertise and all of that, but sometimes in museums like the Louvre and some other museums, they're all stacked together. So it's one masterpiece after masterpiece. It's like, so what, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's also a creator's choice, and also a visitor choice.
In a way, I wish.
But
Sorry.
yeah, no, I was just going to say, but it also shows how subjective art can be, right? Because it's not about the artwork itself; it's the way that it is presented. It is also the things that we project into it, and what remind us of. Because maybe if I would see this painting in the middle of a room, of a normal person's room, I would like this painting. Maybe in that specific room it would look awesome.
Yeah.
Or maybe if I would see it in the museum, I would find it awesome as well. I don't know. But because I saw it on the internet, I don't find it so amazing. But yeah, you were going to say something.
No, I was just. This is just a random thought that popped into my head, but in a way, I would kind of. I wish there was more crappy art in museums. Like if we're talking like art from this period, I wish, or I think it could be really interesting, and I'm sure this has existed somewhere. But it could be really interesting to have a Caravaggio, and then next to that have some of the crappier stuff that was produced at that time. Some of the people that copied him, something that can put it in a context where you sort of understand the brilliance of Caravaggio compared to other people, right? Because there is this effect when you just see all this brilliance in one place, it sort of loses its edge, right? Because you have nothing to compare it to. And especially if you're not somebody who paints in oils. I mean, I think there is, and it's again one of these things that are devalued, I think, in fine arts, but I think artistry does count for something. The ability to produce amazing things with, oil colors and brushes. I think that is impressive, in the same way that circus acrobatics can be impressive and stuff like that. And that maybe makes it sound even worse. But I think there is something about seeing people perform feats with their body, with their hands, with their whatever it is, that are just impressive. And I think there's something that is inspiring and cool about that is, again, completely lost when you're put in a context where it seems like, everybody could paint like Caravaggio, basically, because, I mean, not exactly like him, but at a level of craftsmanship similar to him, because all the best stuff is there, and that is all you have to compare it to. It could be fun to see just some crappiness, some more crap stuff in there to give you a context. I mean, that could be an interesting exhibition, just an exhibition of all the work produced in Naples of this year, where Caravaggio produced this painting.
Yep. Yes, I feel what you're saying. Actually, it's precisely the only thing, or one of the few things. Okay, I like a few things on this painting. I will not be that mean, but I think the thing that I like the most is precisely the sense of of sheer talent and expertise that a person needs to make this kind of painting, because it is the quality in that sense. Technically, it's extremely high. I as I make comics. I would never in my wildest dreams be able to make such a painting, and I'm absolutely sure of that, and I admire that, and I think actually that's when art, what is sometimes spiritual about art, is that art transcends the individual, in that sense, in that you seem to be able, some individuals are able to make things that don't seem human,
Yeah.
that seem divine. And I think from the technical aspect, this painting has that absolutely. So it has that transcendental effect in what concerns technique. But luckily or unluckily for me, I come from Portugal. So in my country, we have the museums with the shitty paintings. So, I'm aware of the shitty paintings that were made in that period of time. Not to shit on my country, because we also have some good paintings there. But, I must agree that paintings from that period specifically, from those kind of periods. Actually, maybe not so much from the 19th century. I think in the 19th century, Portuguese art became really... There are quite remarkable painters, to be honest, in Portugal. There are some that are very, very good. But from earlier periods, you do see, like, for example, from the period of Caravaggio in Portugal, you can see really... really bad stuff, like really, really bad stuff, because it's about, the money that people had, or the money that the people with money had, what kind of money they had, because you can be rich, but how rich you really are, and even where the people with money were putting the money in. And apparently they were not buying good art. They were buying crappy stuff. So in Portugal, you can see that. And I believe that you can see that in other places. There was in Bergen. There is this museum with the golden age, I think, of Norwegian art, also with like landscapes and stuff like that. And I thought that most of it was terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, we have that in Denmark as well, of course. I think it would just be fun to have it juxtaposed with the really, really great stuff. I think that would let you appreciate the really great stuff in a different way. But...
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that would be a bit mean to the bad ones, You're just
they're dead. What do they care?
People can see how bad you are compared to the good ones.
It's for scale.
But you're right. But of course, when you go to the Louvre, you only see, the best of the best.
Exactly.
That's why people pay the ticket. It's not to see crap.
Yeah. No, I know. But it is, it would be... I think I like the thing you said about coming to somebody's home and seeing this painting there. That's actually something I think could be interesting. That could be an interesting kind of recreation of some of what we've lost if people just had art like this on their walls, like just going to people's homes and seeing art on the wall that you hadn't seen before and juxtaposed with completely different stuff, and having this personal quality of this person selected this and it means something to them. And I don't want to badmouth people I know, but I feel like a lot of people don't have that much interesting art on the wall. I've, as much as you say that anything that's reproduced is kitsch, it would be fun if more people sort of had reproductions of art that they really love on their wall. But then also, like, the poster market is just really weird. I find it's really hard to find anything. It's complicated. But that's a different thing.
Well, I don't think that everything printed is kitsch. That it has a bigger tendency to become kitsch. It's easier to become kitsch if you print it. But I think a mirror, a print of a mirror can be quite good on the wall. If the quality of the print is good and all of that, that can be a good painting a good print to have on the wall. And then of course, there's always a matter of money, right? The people that I know are not millionaires, so maybe if I knew a lot of millionaires, I would go to their houses and find some really good paintings, or maybe not, because then again, just because you have money doesn't mean that you have good taste.
Absolutely not.
But even when you are on a lower budget, you can I can buy something, that I'm very interested on, which is art prints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like lino cuts, etchings, stuff that is a bit more affordable, and it's still an original piece of art made by an artist. So you are, funding somebody's career, somebody that is maybe from your community or from some place that you visited and all of that, and it's not that expensive to buy, and that's great. And I love when I come to the house of somebody and they have, a print, an art print on like serigraph, no, a silk screen. Yeah, that's the word in English, a silk screen or something like that on the wall, and it's a great silk screen. That's fun. That's fun, and I do agree when people don't have that often, but on the other side, a lot of people also don't have a lot of money. Maybe in Denmark it's different. Yeah, it's true, because in Denmark people have more money to have good prints, good art prints on the wall.
Yeah,
that's a bit sad when people choose crap. But then again, Eric, you chose to print that on your wall. So what are you talking about?
I think juxtaposed with other things, this can be a fun part of
yeah. I think it looks ironic.
Yeah.
It's at your house, it creates a conversation.
Exactly.
Actually.
It's a conversation starter. Exactly.
Yeah.
In the harmless
It's like
way.
I watched this clip from Slavoj Zizek. It can be quite a meme sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody's entering his house, and he has like a piece of Stalin propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
On the wall, and the journalist asks him, "Why is that there?" And he says, "Precisely to shock the people." So that everyone hates it. So in your house, that's the effect of that painting, I feel.
Maybe I should have some Stalinistic propaganda as well, just for.
Sure, why not?
I think that would shock a different set of people.
Yeah. One would shock aesthetically. Others would be shocked politically. If one doesn't shock, the other will do the job.
I think 90% of people would just find this painting pleasant and not be shocked by it in any way. And then
exactly.
And then
so
snobs
it's
like
great.
you would be be shocked.
So I think that next to it you have a Stalinist painting, because usually people a Stalin piece of propaganda, because usually people that find that kind of painting that you have there pleasant are usually conservatives. So then you have Stalin to shock them.
But also,
and the people that are actually more into the communist side of life, then you have the painting to shock them. So you get the best of both worlds.